It snowed more often, but the snow didn't settle. The ocean heaved in that slow, oily fashion it does when it gets really cold. Occasionally a small number of ducks would appear outside. Sometime in the past they had lost the ability to fly. Nartis asked if I wanted him to catch one so I could eat it. The suggestion seemed horrible. Instead, I started leaving grain outside, and we made a duck shelter close to the cave. The days drifted by. Nights grew longer. I went outside less often. Nartis could still handle the weather, and he kept us supplied with wood and fish. I would do some work and then sit in front of the fire, watching the flames and listening as the westerly wind howled outside. When I was at the Institute, we learned a Buddhist technique of concentrating our minds and watching as thoughts came and went. Over the years I lost the habit. Life seemed so exciting and busy, but now I found time for it. When I was younger it seemed hard to do, but now I felt a sense of peace. I thought about the two great belief systems, Buddhist and Zara. Buddhists saw life as chaos and uncertainty, an aberration rather than a celebration, an illusion, something to accept and manage. Zara saw life as taking chaos and creating order, making societies, obeying laws, supporting the family. And yet for centuries they coexisted peacefully, until the pod wars and the new theories about the Bodhi tree. But enough of that. At some point, Nartis suggested we should play music. So we had our own sessions, soaring away, as Tama would say. I missed Tama and Marie and the rest of them. The season changed. It snowed less often, and the days got longer. One day I was out on the east coast, walking close to the water's edge. The rock ledge dropped off quickly, and the water was deep. I dropped a net and was gathering sea life from a certain depth. As I looked in the water, I saw a pale shape come towards me. Submerged ice was my first thought. Then the whole world exploded. A massive shape rose from the water. Nartis pushed me aside, and in slow motion I watched as a huge set of jaws clamped down on his body and dragged him under. Then it was still again, almost as if nothing had happened, except that Nartis was gone. I was astonished. Then a wave of fear came over me, and I scrambled up the rocks to a higher place. Nartis was gone. I had no fears he was destroyed. It would take more than a whale's jaws to crush an icon. I believed it was a whale that took him. We had seen them before. They would rush the shore, slide out of the sea and take a seal. This time they had taken an icon. For some reason an old story came to mind. A story of Scuppers, the sailor, and his dog. How did it go? Something about sailing over a whale in a fog. I made my way back to the cave and set myself for a lonely night. I gathered extra wood and made sure all the pack heaters and lights were working. Then I cooked some food and sat by the fire to wait. 2 days later, I was on a bluff overlooking the coast, scanning up and down using a powerful spyglass. I saw a movement about 200 meters away. It was a small body climbing across the rocks. A wave would come in, lift it, and drag it back to sea, but it was making progress. It was Nartis. I ran down to the shore and watched over the rocks as the figure climbed out of the sea. He fell a number of times, but as he left the water he took a giant leap. He was out. His face paint was gone, replaced with streaks of green from the seaweed and white from the sand. He looked a little like a painting I had seen of a lady called The Rapture. He paused a few meters away and raised his hand. I did the same, and he advanced towards me. He seemed different, almost excited, very animated. "Are you hurt?" I asked. "No, but I have been to the most amazing places and seen the most amazing things." We turned and walked back towards the cave. I stopped and collected the spyglass as we went past. He started to talk, and he told me of giant beasts colours and forces and landscapes from under the sea. You seem different, I said. He looked at me. I feel different, almost like I found a meaning or a joy in being. We talked more, and when we got to the cave I told him to look in the mirror. He was captivated by the horizontal streaks on his face and body. I will keep these as my paint, and I would like to change my name. He looked at me. What are you called? Matsu. I smiled. The original Arnold spent a year reading and learning at Kess's compound in Kuching. Many of the texts were Chinese. Each icon started with the base information from the Arnold automaton. Their initial philosophy and worldview was very oriental. The days went by. Matsu and I continued our routine. Suddenly the time was almost over and we needed to get ready to record the transit of Afrod. We spent our days constructing a stable platform and preparing the instruments. Matsu was the leader and I was the worker. She knew all the settings and placements. My role was to tighten brass screws and call out readings. On the day of the observation, we started early in the morning in darkness. The sky was clear, a full moon. At that latitude, the full moon seems brighter than other places. It shines off the landscape and calls out the white caps of the waves in the sea. I remembered a story I read when I was young about a mouse who used to bathe in the moon's rays. She wore shoes. Matsu dragged out some packlights, and suddenly the golden shape of the telescope sprang out of the night. We continued our work, checking the settings, making sure it was all correct. Occasionally, a bird would fly into the light, bewildered by the brightness, before flapping off. It was early morning and the transit was due to start. Matsu counted down the seconds and we began our observations. We took 4 points of record as the small disk passed across the face of the sun. First, before it clipped the edge of the sun, and the last as it moved out from the other side. It took 4 hours. The sky remained clear. The chronometer ticked by, though Matsu believed it had lost a second since we first got it. It was all very exciting. I felt that joy that comes when the pieces all fit together, when the work bears fruit. We took our precious readings and notes back into the cave. That night I had my usual bath, but also drank a half bottle of wine, and even though I was tired the next day, the depression I felt last time I drank was completely gone. So that was it. We spent the next 2 weeks packing up our specimens and sorting out our notes. Spring was on the way, though a full day of snow and sleet was still a common occurrence. I started thinking more about the Zephyr and what it would be like to go back home. I had mixed feelings. I was looking forward to seeing the people, Tama, Marie and the others from the White City, but the time we had on the island was almost like a bubble, a stillness and calmness, even though the wind never stopped blowing. I would miss that. And as I watched her pack the last of the papers, I realized I would miss the bond I had formed with Matsu. When we first arrived, she seemed to me like a thing, like a tool. Now she was a real person, not just because I was used to her, but she had also gone through changes since coming to the island. I watched the purposeful way she packed the goods and admired the bright, fresh streaks of green and white paint that were her personal sign. She looked up and saw me watching her, and she raised her hand. I smiled at her. The Zephyr returned on a cold, clear day. I watched the horizon and noticed the small, pale dot as it appeared and grew bigger in the sky. Seals and sea lions had returned to the island, and our small world was becoming busy with animals and birds getting ready to breed. The airship passed above us and anchored further down the beach. People came out from the hull and walked towards us. I felt sad it was over, but excited at what was to come. The world was a good place to be.